In today's wilderness training video, we're going to take a walk on the wild side. And just like that time you forgot your map and had to spend forever figuring out where you were, the title of today's act may be just as long as it took for you to get out of the woods. Today we'll be looking at an act to establish a national wilderness preservation system for the permanent good of the whole people and for other purposes, otherwise known by its short title, the Wilderness Act. The Wilderness Act was signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson in 1964 with bipartisan support. Some ideas really are that good. So what is the Wilderness Act? Where did it all start? Let's talk about America in the long, long ago, before the passage of the Wilderness Act. At the beginning of the 20th century, rapid settlement, industrialization, and the advent of the automobile were consuming natural resources and the land itself at an astonishing rate. This notion of the vanishing frontier lay the seeds of wilderness preservation in the United States. It is no accident that the movement to set aside wilderness areas began to gain real momentum at precisely the time that cries to preserve the remaining frontier reached their peak. To protect wilderness was, in a very real sense, to protect the nation's story of identity. Americans were becoming consumers by the 1950s, and public lands were less valued for their beauty, inspiration, or as homes for wildlife. They were seen as a source of natural resources, like lumber, minerals, water, and power fueling the development boom. Within just 100 years, Americans had altered the landscape in ways never thought possible by early generations of Americans, and many people began to fear for our remaining wildlands. Galvanized by catastrophic losses of precious places, declining air and water quality, loss of native species, and a growing interest in preserving our natural heritage, our story of origin, the wilderness movement went mainstream. During the first half of the 1900s, many individuals and grassroots organizations were fighting for a new type of protection for federal lands, an antidote to the increasing population, expanding settlement, and growing mechanization. In 1935, the Wilderness Society was born. Well-known figures like Aldo Leopold, Robert Marshall, and Marty Murray were early leaders and members of the society. So what were they fighting for? Let's go back to the first thing I said. The Wilderness Act created a national wilderness preservation system for the good of all people. Seems simple enough, right? A system of protected federal lands? But where is it? And who's managing it? That's where things get interesting. The National Wilderness Preservation System is made up of congressionally designated wilderness on federal lands managed by 4 agencies: the Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, and National Park Service. Since 1964, with the passage of the Wilderness Act, the National Wilderness Preservation System has grown from 9.1 million acres to over 111.4 million acres in 2020. Today, all but 6 states in the nation have wilderness designated and protected within them. Congress was specific in defining what wilderness is. The Act states that a wilderness, in contrast to those areas where man and his works dominate the landscape, is an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. Let me say that again. Where earth is untrammeled by man. Did you think I said untrampled? Nope, I didn't. I said untrammeled. This quality, the untrammeled quality, puts the wild in wilderness. So what does it mean? Untrammeled is a seldom used word with a powerful meaning. Polly Dyer, an environmental activist fighting for protection of lands in the Olympic Peninsula in the 1950s, used this word in her campaigns. She suggested to Howard Zonheiser, the primary author of the Wilderness Act, that he use the word, the concept, to describe wilderness. A trammel is a net, or shackle, or hobble. It's something that restricts movement and impedes free play. Some of the synonyms to untrammeled are unmanipulated, unrestrained, unhindered, wild, uncontrolled, and free. You can see the intent of the word untrammeled in the Wilderness Act. These are areas where humans do not direct what goes on in the environment. It is the forces of nature that affect the environment. The Act goes on to define wilderness as areas that are also natural and undeveloped, areas where there are outstanding opportunities for those who seek solitude or wish to enjoy a rugged, primitive, or unconfined type of recreation. Wilderness may contain other features which are unique to that wilderness and are also protected as part of its wilderness character. 3 places in the Act, agencies are directed to preserve wilderness character. This is often referred to as the primary mandate of the Act. Wilderness character is not specifically defined, but it has been interpreted as the interaction of 3 societal values: biophysical environments, personal experiences, and symbolic meanings such as humility, restraint, and interdependence. Taken together, these tangible and intangible values define wilderness character and distinguish wilderness from all other lands. Wilderness designation is the highest level of protection granted to federal lands. In order to maintain and preserve the wilderness character of these areas, the Act prohibits certain uses sometimes allowed on other federal lands. The Act says there shall be no commercial enterprises, permanent roads, temporary roads, use of motor vehicles, motorized equipment, use of motorboats, landing of aircraft, mechanical transport, structures, or installations. That's right, no roads, no vehicles, no bicycles, no chainsaws, no helicopters or airplanes, no cabins. Wilderness is land retaining its primeval character without permanent improvements or human habitation, where the imprint of man's work is substantially unnoticeable. Though there are no permanent improvements, wilderness is there for all Americans to enter, enjoy, and benefit from. 8 of the 10 of those prohibitions, those except permanent roads and commercial enterprises that I listed, can be allowed in wilderness as a, let's say, last resort. That means that they are strictly prohibited, except as necessary to meet the minimum requirements for the administration of the area for the purposes of this Act. As with any legislation, exceptions and compromises are made to ensure passage. These include private rights existing before wilderness designation, special provisions to support national goals identified in the Wilderness Act, or uniquely identified for individual wilderness areas through the statutes that designated those areas, or when actually needed to preserve the area's wilderness character. Wilderness is an important resource. In 1964, with the passage of the Wilderness Act, Congress stated that the purpose of wilderness is to secure for the American people of present and future generations the benefits of an enduring resource of wilderness. They saw wilderness as one resource. Just as air, water, minerals, timber, and wildlife, to name a few, are resources, so is wilderness. Wilderness is a resource that includes areas like the Arctic tundra in Alaska, swamps in the southeast, alpine forests, coastal sand dunes, hardwood forests of the northeast, and deserts of the southwest. Remember, almost every state in the country has designated wilderness protecting unique ecosystems. As stated in the Wilderness Act, except as otherwise provided in this Act, each agency administering any area designated as wilderness shall be responsible for preserving the wilderness character. So the wilderness mission of the Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, and the National Park Service is to preserve the wilderness character of those lands as an enduring resource for present and future generations. And how do we do that? We do it by practicing restraint and humility in any management action considered in wilderness. And we do it by monitoring the condition of wilderness so as to know when any of its qualities are degraded and in need of stewardship attention. In order to assure that an increasing population, accompanied by expanding settlement and growing mechanization, does not occupy and modify all areas within the United States and its possessions, leaving no lands designated for preservation and protection in their natural condition. It is hereby declared to be the policy of the Congress to secure for the American people of present and future generations the benefits of an enduring resource of wilderness. The Wilderness Act, Section 2A. Obviously, the law is much more complex, but we hope that you walk away with a better understanding of how it works, and be on the lookout for other videos in this series and training opportunities at the Arthur Carhart National Wilderness Training Center. Thank you for watching.